Ever wondered how startups can actually get their AgeTech solutions into the hands of those who need them? In today's episode of the AgeTech Podcast, we're diving into an exciting initiative that's changing the game in Canada. From securing federal funding to matchmaking with startups, my guest Sabrina Boutin covers it all. Stick around to hear how EnvisAGE is shaping the future of AgeTech in Canada and how you can get involved. Sabrina, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me here today.
So could you please introduce yourself and the EnvisAGE initiative, because it's fairly new and it's possible that some people are just hearing about it for the first time.
Exactly. So thank you. And that's no problem for me. So EnvisAGE has been envisioned 4 years ago by the previous owner and CEO of MedTech Plus, and also in co-leading and in collaboration with AgeWell. AgeWell is a network of aging and technology. It's a network, pan-Canadian network as well, that's supporting academia and researcher in pushing boundaries in realizing or developing technologies to support older adult and quality aging. MedTech Plus, who's collaborating and co-leading EnvisAGE with AgeWell. MedTech Plus is a consortium of an organization that support SMEs, but also academic collaboration, research, and R&D development in medtech as a whole, but understanding that AgeTech is also part of medtech in terms of umbrella categories for technology in health and for population. The mix between AgeWell and MedTech Plus was to be seen and was a good collaboration to bring out the EnvisAGE initiative to life. So that was initiated a couple of years ago. The EnvisAGE initiative was then submitted to a federal fund for Canada, and it was accepted and rendered eligible. And then the EnvisAGE project proposal became a real life initiative. And then we were able to launch our first forum, our first event last year in October 2023. And I would say that from that time, everything just was launched and took flight.
That is awesome. And I love how the Canadian government recognizes the importance of AgeTech and of collaborations to commercialize AgeTech solutions. And I believe government funding really goes a long way towards helping startups in those phases. So you launched in October 2023. Your second call for proposals was just finalized. Can you tell us a little bit about the types of startups that are encouraged to apply to EnvisAGE?
Exactly. So we were successful in exactly that, launching our second call for innovation for EnvisAGE. And just to reiterate, the EnvisAGE unveiling, how we call it. So unveiling of, we received the funding from the federal government was actually publicized in January 2023. But we realized our first forum, our first call for innovation in October 2023, just to clarify sometimes on the timeline of that large scale initiative. And then our second call that was launched last October of this year, we were able to announce the first cohort of projects in EnvisAGE. So from the last year project selection and evaluation process, 16 projects were selected. And those are the ones that are publicized and announced on our website and also publicly across Canada. So in those 16 projects, we go from technologies and SMEs that have technologies that are supporting older adults at home, but also others that are more geared to supporting organizations that are either community-based or private or socially based, that are supporting older adults and caregivers and offering services that goes from food to being as well. For EnvisAGE, what we're aiming in terms of SMEs and collaboration with different type of organization is really SMEs that have technologies that are TRL 7 and 9, pre-commercialization and commercialization. So we're less into that world of pilot testing or proof of concept where SMEs need to collaborate with an organization to generate the first data or have a proof of concept or understanding if it does work in the targeted population. EnvisAGE is a little bit further than that. What we want is moving away from piloting and ensuring that we are integrating, demonstrating something with stronger data that have done its proof, but now that can be commercialized and also deployed in different settings. So those are the type of SMEs, maturity, and TRL for technologies that we're looking for in terms of eligibility to just enter in an EnvisAGE cohort.
And how does the collaborative aspect of this initiative work? So that do the startups that apply already need to have a partner that they want to collaborate with so they can share the grant?
So we have the two scenarios and multiple actually scenarios. In most of our projects, we have SMEs that may already be in a relationship, a collaboration with an organization, or in discussion to develop or build a project. So those are admissible and eligible for EnvisAGE. The SMEs or even the organization will work together. They could write together a letter of intention and apply for EnvisAGE to see if they could then progress to the other phases of the process and then build a project proposal. We also have different scenarios where an SME across Canada has a technology, thinks it's worth to apply to EnvisAGE, but doesn't really have a relationship with an organization. So the EnvisAGE team, since we're supporting any SMEs or organization across Canada, we have the knowledge with our different partners of the type of organization also that have different needs. And then we have that pipeline of SMEs that are alone or solo that would require matchmaking. That's how we could call it, with a different organization that would fit, the needs with the technology. So the EnvisAGE team is supporting that matchmaking as well. It's, a longer process. It's more effort and ensuring that we probably deepen the need assessment of the organization, making sure that there's a quite good understanding of their needs and their capacity. And in the same time, in parallel, we need to make sure that the technology that the SME has can readily answer that needs. And if there's a fit, there's an introduction. And then we, in terms of we will support that matchmaking and also the project proposal development as well, because now the relationship is from new to we're going to build something together. So it takes a little bit more support. So those two scenarios are what we have seen our first cohort and in that second cohort as well. And if I can add really quickly, we also have a third scenario, because in most of our projects in EnvisAGE, we have either expert centers that could support the R&D development or the evaluation. We call them the beachheads or the innovation hubs. And those sometimes they already are acquainted or they know SMEs, they know organizations. So sometimes those expertise centers are the one identifying SMEs and organizations that could develop a project with them. And then there's a path to project proposal development as well.
It makes a lot of sense because between MedTech and AgeWell, you have such vast networks of organizations. So I love that you also do the matchmaking and you are involved in facilitating these collaborations.
Exactly.
I wonder, is it a requirement for the startup to have headquarters somewhere in Canada, or can an American startup find a collaborator within Canada and apply with them to the grant?
The important thing, since it's public funding, and EnvisAGE is providing a funding contribution. So again, in our initiative, we do not fund 100% the cost of the projects. It's a contribution that is provided, but because it's public funding, because it's Canadian funding, one eligibility criteria for EnvisAGE is that one of the SME headquarters has to be in Canada. There's IP, intellectual property concept, and also parameters that we have to follow as well. If we have SMEs or companies that are coming from outside Canada, they need to be able to work with an SME that is in Canada as well. And we have to look then and have the negotiation and the discussion in terms of IP, and the IP has to stay in Canada. So that's quite important as well.
That also totally makes a lot of sense. And I assume it also maybe motivates some startups to set up headquarters in Canada and to maybe open some jobs for talented Canadians to apply and come work with the startup.
Exactly. And now we have a capacity to collaborate with international, and it's not to close the door, because we also need to be able to show the SMEs, or let's say our successful projects outside Canada as well. It's quite important to be able to show that we can also have that Canada has its place in terms of developing AgeTech, building new business model as well. And so those collaboration with creativity, I think we can also have a capacity to support those type of projects as well.
Absolutely. And the funding is because it's grant funding. non-dilutive, and EnvisAGE doesn't take equity in the project.
Mhm.
Okay. And is it possible for an established company that has a new type of technology to still apply?
If the company has a new type of technology, so what we're looking for, we don't take equity, but with EnvisAGE, and if the project is successful, if the SMEs also was able to develop some R&D and is groundbreaking. So what we will be looking for is ensuring with the different partnership we have with VCs, with other contributors. If there's an interest, then for us, for EnvisAGE, one of our goals is also to be able to bring visibility to that SME or that technology, to be able to be seen for investors and other type of partners, or a large multinational as well. So even if the technology is a known one, a strong one, we still need to have a little bit of R&D to be able to fit into that program. And in any way possible, we would also be able to support some of those innovators depending on their ask.
And that makes a lot of sense. And the application process has multiple steps. Can you walk us through what is it like for an SME to apply, and how long does it typically get before getting to the final, yes, we're going to fund this project?
So there's a window of 6 months, averaging 6-7 months, depending sometimes if we have to extend the submission period. So we're not quite different from other type of grant or even research initiative, funding initiative, where you would be looking at a launch of a call. We are publicizing that the doors are open to express your interest. Within a month from the launch of that information and the first submission phase, which is a letter of intention or expression of interest, we have these two, meaning that if you have an SME that's already known and collaborating with an organization, then they have a type of documents to fill out. If it's a single organization or a single SME, it's a different document. But that period is within a month from the launch of the call to expressing your interest that you may have a technology or project that could be fitting with EnvisAGE. Then you have that month window. Then we have a good 3-month period. SMEs need to go through a due diligence. That's quite important on our process, and it's comparable to others as well, ensuring that there's a strength in an SME to support an integration and deployment, because it's not a pilot, because sometimes the organization, they do not know the SMEs. We also have a reputation, but also quality assurance that the pipeline of SMEs and even organization we bring into EnvisAGE are strong enough and have the capacity to go into that integration project, but beyond, because we're looking for commercialization. So we need to ensure that the project can be sustainable if it's to be submitted in EnvisAGE. That 3-month window after is a longer phase because there's matchmaking, like I explained a bit before. So if the organization and the SME or even the expert centers, they don't know each other, there's that trust building and also understanding of what they want to do in the project. So that's quite important. Then we have the submission date, which is along that 4-month window. And then goes the evaluation process that takes a good month and a half, 2 months. We have a strong governance in EnvisAGE, 5 governance committees, board of directors. So as you understand, there's also some oversight from federal government. So that's why that 6-month window, 6 to 7 months, is quite important. But we have two phases of submission for EnvisAGE throughout the year, one in spring, one in fall. So what it does is that if an organization is submitting the letter of intention early on in December, they can submit in March, or if they pass that March window, they have another opportunity later on in the fall to submit their project proposal. And what's good in EnvisAGE is across Canada, with the staff we have, we support that project proposal development. We support the negotiation, reading of the contracts, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot in it. But we have tools, supporting documentation, a website to be able to support any organization or enterprise that would be interested in submitting.
It's wonderful that you are not just facilitating these collaborations, but also supporting the process. And because I imagine just going through all of the legal documentation, a long and cumbersome process. Can you perhaps share some examples from the first cohort of 16 companies of successful collaborations or even successful commercialization?
Yeah, from the 16, and there's one that was actually 2 weeks or 3 weeks ago. There was an interview, and I think it was on the news. Without naming specifically different enterprise, because I think they're all at the beginning of their project launching at this point in time. But there's one that's a robotic kitchen, but this one we can name. It's called Chef Jasper. So for any organization that had housing or aging in place for the older adult, so looking at optimizing some of the processes in the kitchen for food, for quality and well-being of the residents. So those are the type of technologies that we're seeing. We also have a couple of safety virtual monitoring at home or in an organization that's providing also long-term care or resident housing. So those are quite interesting because there are different technologies. I think we have 3 projects that are looking at monitoring virtual well-being, ensuring that there's also assistance from either caregivers that are quite important in all of our projects. So those type of technologies of preventing falls for sure. So they come back, but even if you look at research, you look at the community-based organization or even older adults at home, the fear of falling, the risk of fall, or the prevalence of those type of incidents are still the ones coming first in the needs. So that's why sometimes we see a lot of fall prevention technology, and we always wonder how many can we have in that sector. But I think it's quite interesting to be able to compare. And there's still a market that has space for different type of technologies to answer that needs. So we're looking at that too. And the others that are quite interesting also for self-monitoring in terms of heart monitoring, dementia as well, and so on and so forth. So I think our 16 projects are giving us a good view of our first cohort. But looking at the second cohort right now and what's coming in, there's more projects. The span of needs are quite important. And for EnvisAGE, we're looking at healthcare, home care, transport, finance, being, connecting with communities. So we have our 8 challenges or our 8 needs that have been identified by AgeWell. Those are still the ones that we're looking for. All our call for innovations, they're quite large, but they can answer a variety of needs coming from the population and the community.
Absolutely. And since AgeWell did such a phenomenal job in defining those 8 challenge areas, I assume that they will be going forward with EnvisAGE for the entire duration of your funding?
Exactly. But what we are open to as well is working with different governments, because we have received funding from the federal government, but we also have received funding from provincial Quebec. We're looking for Ontario, Alberta. So our goal is to engage and ensure contribution for all the provinces in Canada. So depending of the needs also and the priorities of the governments, we will also include other specifics or other targeted thematics, if we can say, to fit the needs of our funders as well. So there's capacity of always keeping those 8 challenges, but also being flexible in maybe launching mini calls on specific needs. And if we are grateful to also have a large older adults and caregiver committee, and we will also have an ecosystem committee that will cover various stakeholders across Canada. And if we see that from the ground there's a different need, maybe that's the one we would want to answer in one of those years that AGE will be active.
That brings me to a question that never occurred to me. Since you also got funding from some of the provinces, are they also a potential collaborator? Could a startup reach out to EnvisAGE and say, hey, I've got this amazing technology that can be used by municipalities, for example, and then they can go and work with one of the provinces to commercialize it?
They could, exactly. We could be a facilitator. Again, when you're looking at procurement at that level, it's quite different than a private organization that can just say it works, I buy it. So when you are with public organization, there's a different path, sometimes more challenging, but we would be there as facilitator. And if the government is interested in one technology, for sure, we would want to be one to support that negotiation and that support as well.
And the funding for the initiative currently is for 5 years. Am I correct?
Exactly. The funding is for 5 years, but one of our goal and also our KPI is it's funding to start the initiative. But again, we need to be viable, we need to be sustainable. So the goal is to, again, have the support from different government, but also looking for other type of sources of funding. So private, we're looking for multinationals. We're open for partnership, even with international venues or programs that are supporting healthy health aging and caregiver support. Philanthropy is also one of our goals, to look at foundations that are already supporting community-based organization. And that for us is important. How can they support EnvisAGE? How can those stakeholders support specific projects as well that could best fit with their mission?
That's awesome. And I love cross-sector collaborations. Looking at the long-term vision, how do you see the EnvisAGE initiative transforming Canada's aged care sector at the end of these 5 years and maybe 10 or 20 years down the line?
Exactly. And that's a very good question. And from the get-go, I would say that what will be important is how can we leverage data or information, insight, and lessons learned that we will have from this first year and those first projects, but also how we develop that large-scale initiative. How can we bring that information to a level where we can share with others that are already in AgeTech? Again, is a year old, but there was also other organization and other initiative in that sector. How can we work together to ensure that we then create a Canadian insight and knowledge that could be even shared at the international level, but also across different actors in Canada? So I think EnvisAGE in itself can contribute to knowledge, can contribute to developing new AgeTech model, if we can call it this way, and ensure that I think the word transformative is good, but it's also catalyzing what's already existing, but bringing maybe new information or insight at another level. So our goal would be to gather any other interested organization or large-scale initiative such as ours, make sure that we have a space or a forum where we can share, where we can develop some knowledge or documentation that can then be useful for at any level, from the older adults and caregiver in their home, which is quite important, and not only in urban area, but also rural. And as Canada is quite large and has large territories, and we will have learnings as well from territories, municipalities, and I think those needs to be spread and understood.
Absolutely. And perhaps other countries that have vast territories and a large rural population can also learn from your insights.
Exactly.
So that was actually my last question. Is there anything that we didn't talk about that you would like to add? Any call to action to our viewers or listeners?
Exactly. What I can say right now is our second call was just launched. We're still in the midst of receiving letter of intentions. We have our website where you can find the information on how to submit the letter of intention. In that phase, we will be able to contact you, look at the eligibility, and we hope that our teams will be able to support you in developing project or bringing forward your technology to support older adults and caregivers. So for us, I think it's quite important as well. And what will be important is ensuring that EnvisAGE has its place and also can be transformative for Canada, but as well from any other places in the world.
Absolutely. Sabrina, thank you so much for joining me on the show today. It was an absolute pleasure meeting you and chatting with you about EnvisAGE.
No problem. And it was a pleasure. And anytime I'll be available.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching this episode of the AgeTech Podcast. If you enjoyed it, make sure to hit the like, subscribe, and get notification buttons so you can get a notification whenever we publish a new episode. Until next time, stay humble, stay curious,